Crew of the Imperial Navy, this is Admiral Tyrant speaking. We have encountered the enemy. They have chosen piracy over duty and damnation over service, but we are still the Emperor's fleet. Remember your oaths. Remember the worlds behind us, the billions who sleep safely because ships like this stand in the line. We do not run. We do not surrender.
Thank you, Admiral, but I will take it from here. Attention crew of the Imperial vessel, the Hand of Mankind. You can stop running. Your engines are down, damaged, and ready for detonation. Any attempts to escape will be met with a 200 gigaton detonation that could make space itself scream louder than your own cries of pain and fear. So allow me to tell you the next string of events. You felt the shake, we have already boarded. You will hear your officers scream orders they don't believe in, and you will ignore them. You can scream for the Emperor, struggle, and die. Or you can live. Drop your weapons, power down your gun batteries, and if you do, I swear on the void itself that some of you will live. Most of you will keep your limbs as well. Resist, and I will ignite your deck with Phosphex weaponry. I will jettison every last surf into the vacuum of space through your own torpedo tubes, and I will leave your ship cracked in half as a warning to all those who enter my void. This is not a battle. This is not piracy. Your cargo, your ship, your future. What's yours is mine, and what's mine was never yours to begin with.
There are three things that are certain in life. I will die alone, I will die to begin with, and I have to pay taxes. It's not really something you consider when you're younger. You knew about taxes, and historically taxes have always existed. You pay the government a part of your wages, so that way the funds can go to public works like road infrastructure, education, and so on and so forth, but not healthcare. Taxes are given so that we, as a collective society, can benefit from it. Okay, now how many of you still actually believe that shit as an adult? This isn't a political statement, this is more of a human one. No one fucking likes taxes. I don't care if you own a business or a cardboard box. Some dickhead in a suit and tie tells you that you gotta pay him money just on the promise that it'll be put to good use somewhere else. Drive down a highway in California and you tell me that cash is going towards roadworks because it fucking isn't. You are literally pissing away money to people who make far more than you, who run the government and the economy, just hoping that they keep their promise. So what if you just didn't do that? What if you became ungovernable? What if you became, in essence, a pirate? The Red Corsairs, for as much as they get memed on, are just that, Space Marine pirates, but holy fuck, their story is a lot more complicated than that. So who are the Red Corsairs? Where did they come from? And why do people keep bringing the fucking Lamenters into battles? God damn it, holy shit, they don't need to be here. Well, we'll get into that and more because I am Dadium, the man in the broken tower, here to tell you that it is your divine right as a human being to evade taxes. But more on that after this message. Hit that subscribe button, it would help a lot. Memberships are a thing. You get into the Discord. We're running games on Tabletop Simulator, and after I'm done editing this, I'm actually going to go play some. I try to host game nights every Wednesday. Hopefully that's going to become more consistent, and in the future, I do want to hold painting competitions as well as competitions for 40k tournaments. And yes, there will be prizes, or at least that's the hope. As always, chosen tier higher, you get your name put on the model, and I promise I will start showing these off at some point when I actually get my shed built back up. And after 1 year of being in either Chosen or Warpsmith, I kit bash you into my army, just as a little anniversary celebration for sticking around for so long. Two things, because it's been brought to my attention. One is for people on mobile. Apparently there's a hype button. I don't know what it does. I'm told that you guys should press it. Also, same thing from the last video because I only got like 2 comments about it, so this is just one last time to see if there's any engagement for it. I am considering opening up a Patreon for those of you who hate YouTube memberships, so if you want me to do that, please actually comment it so that way I know that people want it. Anyways, it's time for a long story about the lengths a man will go to avoid paying the government. This video is going to become a Badab War video at this point because it's hard to talk about the Red Corsairs without talking about the Badab War. I've tried to avoid it at first, but it's very deeply ingrained into the history of the Red Corsairs, and while I'm gonna spend a majority of the video talking about it, I'm not going to go over the entirety of the Badab War, because let me go ahead and just tell you how the Badab War went. There was a bunch of Space Marines that really didn't like each other, and so they started beating each other up, which is basically every fucking conflict that's ever happened in 40k. The Badab War was written in the Imperial Armor books, if I remember correctly, which is the Forge World stuff before Forge World got fully folded into Games Workshop. And it was virtually just an excuse to make a bunch of new different chapters, make a bunch of characters, and sell people more minis. Did it work? Yeah, it did, because this is also the place where we got Tyberos the Red Wake. First, before we talk about the Badab War, we have to talk about the Badab Schism, because that matters a lot more. Technically the Scourge campaign, but those are the similar things. I'll go ahead and get into it. Enter, stage left, the Maelstrom. Before the Great Rift was created due to the fall of Cadia, the Maelstrom was the second largest terror in reality, only shadowed by the Eye of Terror. Which, by the way, here's the Eye of Terror compared to the size of Earth, and I'll go ahead and keep showing you how big it really is as I continue on. So, the Maelstrom was next to the Maelstrom Zone, which is a series of solar systems in close proximity to, obviously, the Maelstrom. Worlds that were constantly being raided by Chaos Space Marines, Orcs, and I do believe some Drukhari every now and again. The issue is that due to the location of the Maelstrom being close to the galactic core, which if you know anything about the leaks of Otan, you know that the galactic core is home to many highly valuable minerals and ores. Enter stage right the Astral Claws, a Space Marine chapter that was designed to patrol the Maelstrom Zone, while also trying to obviously reconquer the worlds, kill Xenos, Chaos, and anything that didn't listen to them. Eventually, they started making a bit more headway during the Scourge campaign. Oh, it should be stated, the Lamenters were around for practically all of what's about to happen, as well as the Mantis Warriors, and specifically they were on the side of the Astral Claws, but I'll go ahead and talk about that more in the future. For around 100 years, the Astral Claws and company were absolutely ass-beating everybody within the Maelstrom Zone, not without getting their own shit rocked, and enters stage center is the dead body of the previous chapter master of the Astral Claws. And enter stage above, I'll stop making this joke, I promise, came Luft Huron. Sound familiar? Huron himself is an interesting guy, and we'll talk more about him as time goes on. Yes, everything's going to be talked about in the future. We're just trying to get the basis of what's going on here set up first. He is described as being peerless, a natural warrior and leader. He rose through the ranks rapidly in the first company before becoming captain of the fourth company, and due to his high popularity, he was elected to be the new chapter master. Strike one. Why Strike One, you ask? Well, for a few reasons. After all, we're talking about a Chaos Warband, and I think everybody knows that this story doesn't particularly end well. It's called the Badab War, and they're not exactly holding hands the entire time. But Strike One was making Huron himself the chapter master. Regardless, Luft Huron ends up as the chapter master and takes over the campaign, to the point where he and his allies are putting belt to ass so fucking hard that they might unironically be able to just take the Maelstrom. Well, they can't contain it perfectly, but they could, turn the Badab sector into a new Cadian Gate, where they have a series of worlds surrounding the Maelstrom to hinder and exterminate chaos. Not to mention, there was also a bunch of orcs in the area that they were just absolutely getting the shit beaten out of by them, and also beating the shit out of them, which is, I believe, how they lost their chapter masters to begin with. All of this, like I said, is not without losses. In fact, there was very heavy losses. But Huron and company were able to not only retake the sector, but also make it so safe that it immediately started making profit. Huron decided to make a pilgrimage to Terra, where he and the boys petitioned a plan to retake the entirety of the surrounding area of the Maelstrom, as it was very much more than achievable at this point. Through the hard work and dedication that was happening, and with the supplies being created due to now the multiple worlds under his rule, which I think happened because there was like some sort of a coup or something. I don't know. My brain melted when I was reading some of this, but I got the rest of the important details, don't worry. Huron ended up becoming the self-appointed governor of Badab Primaris itself, which is the home world of the entire Badab sector, and became known as the Tyrant of Badab. Continuing on, Huron, which he had several revisions of his plan, requested reinforcements to his sector, which might have even called for an entire new founding of Space Marine chapters in order to take the Maelstrom. He was denied, and every single one of his revisions were also denied. It's time we talk about tithes, which are taxes. You see, Terra didn't really give a shit what Huron was up to for one big reason, and that was the tithe. Huron was to give resources and manpower and send it back to wherever the Adeptus Terra demanded it. And there is the slightly lesser known tithe, the Gene Seed tithe, in order to build up Gene Seed repositories for future foundings, as well as to ensure no chapter outright dies. Any chapter is required to send at least 5% of its Gene Seed every, decade, I believe. In reality, this is not that much gene seed being lost, as gene seed can be cultivated in Marines. When one gene seed is planted in one of them, another one grows, so that way it can be taken out and new Space Marines can be made. At least I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Otherwise, Space Marines would just lose gene seed over time and just be wiped out. So it's not like the tithe is bleeding the chapters dry. It's only 5% every 10 years. I don't know how long gene seed takes to be made, but that's besides the point. It's also a tactic to dissuade legion building. Like I said, it doesn't really do much in terms of numbers, but it's more of just like an honor system. Like, hey, you're honoring the tithe, so it's assumed that you're just not hoarding a bunch of gene seed and boosting up your numbers to an insane level. Black Templars. Huron, upon hearing all of his revisions of the plan for a very easily achievable victory were denied, he proceeds to throw a bitch fit, an understandable one mind you, and went back to the Badab sector and seized all tithes in protest against the Imperium. Strike 2. Not only the tithes, but also any nearby planets and sectors that fell under the umbrella of Huron's rule were cordoned off, and any attempts to sail or trade through his void would be met with aggression. Not necessarily shooting on sight, just aggression. At this point, the Ring of Steel, I think is what it's called, was created. It was a series of naval ships, battle stations, space stations, and a bunch of other defenses around Badab Primaris and the entire Badab sector, created to be a nigh impenetrable zone. It was funny because I can't remember if it was the Mechanicus or someone else who the High Lord sent, decided to try and make landfall on Badab Primaris. A little back and forth went here and there, and to their benefit, the Astral Claws were actually ready to at least talk to the Imperials that were trying to come onto their planet, should the visitors have been subjected to a boarding party and to be searched. Being sent from the corpse of bureaucracy that is the Adeptus Terra, these guys obviously didn't listen and were subsequently fired upon and destroyed. This is technically Strike 3, but Strike 3 is actually a whole lot worse. Alright, so the Badab War is massive, and I do want to do a video on it eventually, but I'm gonna say right now, it's just a lot of fighting, and the few interesting things that do happen, I do try to cover in this video. But this is a Red Corsairs video, and I do want to get to talking about them and not necessarily the Astral Claws the entire time. So fast forwarding through a bunch of the war, the Red Scorpions and the Astral Claws on opposite sides end up trying to have peace talks with each other, and it seems like Huron might actually end up turning himself in, but that was until the Inquisition, being fucking idiots, and some people claim it was the Forces of Chaos, but let's be real, it was the fucking Inquisition, decided to take the opportunity to bombard the peace talks in an attempt to not just kill Huron or the other chapter masters that are allied with him, but to also kill the Red Scorpions chapter master because he was entertaining peace talks with a traitor, and we do not negotiate with traitors. Keep in mind, at this time, Huron is just a renegade. He's not full chaos yet. And they still decided to just bombard him, the Lamenters, and the Mantis Warriors. There's also a Space Hulk floating around somewhere, I think, at this time. I don't remember much about this, I'm gonna be honest. I think it just, like, stays there for a little bit, but it also might, I think, is relevant in Arcs of Omen. I can't remember. It stays there for a little bit. The Lamenters absolutely get fucking bodied by the Minotaurs, and the Mantis Warriors get fucked so hard that they have to resort to guerrilla tactics. They then send the fucking Carcharodons after them to either wipe them out or make them surrender. Not being idiots, the Mantis Warriors fucking surrendered. And both the Lamenters and the Mantis Warriors were sent on penitent crusades, and I believe the Lamenters ended up getting wiped out, except for the one Dreadnought Cryon, who was a part of the Death Watch. But I do believe that the Lamenters now have Primaris reinforcements, and the Mantis Warriors at this point in canon have been accepted for their crimes of allying with Luft Huron. This entire fight was such a mess, and a bunch of random shit ends up occurring, and it's funny because the Adeptus Terra said that they could not spare more manpower or would even entertain the idea of a new founding for the purposes of taking the Maelstrom. Then, Huron defected, and all of a sudden, all these chapters were suddenly not so busy, and not to mention that apparently the High Lords of Terra were considering making a new founding just to fight Huron. There's a bureaucracy joke here, but I think it's trapped underneath all this paperwork. A bunch of other things happened. The Astral Claws were able to recruit the Executioners because they owed them like an honor debt or something like that. And at this point, it was still just Imperial versus Renegades. The Astral Claws weren't exactly out of their depth in their ideals. The Astral Claws and the Executioners fight the Salamanders, which, I mean, if you're fighting the Salamanders, you're already on the wrong side of history. And the Salamanders actually do surrender because, once again, this is just Imperials versus Renegades. It's not to the death. Like, nobody else needs to die. Then the bigger issue comes to play. Huron was not only just holding gene seed for the tithe. Garion, his chief apothecary, had issued a mandate, I believe, to steal the fucking gene seed of other space marines, meaning that the Astral Claws were getting more than enough gene seed to build a legion, and for anybody who doesn't know, stealing gene seed is a massive fucking no-no. They tried to steal the rest of the Salamander's gene seed repositories on their battle barge, and when denied, attempted to execute every last Salamander. That was until the executioner said, fuck that, and proceeded to hunt down the contingent of Astral Claws on the ship before bowing out of the war after beating some more ass at the request of the Salamanders because it wasn't their fault. Daily reminder, if you are fighting the Salamanders, you are the asshole. Huron, we need to talk about him a little bit more. Huron's not a nice dude. He was already described as lacking selflessness. He's a bit of a megalomaniac even before the Badab War, but as the situation worsened and every last one of his allies were either killed or just taken out of the fight, his paranoia and suspicion became so much worse, and it also probably didn't help that he was right next to the fucking Maelstrom for at least 150 years. For anybody who doesn't know, while Cadia was still around, it constantly had chaos cults spawning around it because of its close proximity to the Eye of Terror. At this point, he then proceeded to murder all Imperial priests, destroyed any Imperial iconography, and renounced his duty to the Imperium, and that's when we get his famous quote. The only reward for loyalty is betrayal. Become ungovernable. This was Strike 3. One massive naval battle later, and the Astral Claws are alone, without a navy, and the only thing left to defend them is the Ring of Steel. It's a massive defense array, nigh impenetrable, so how does the Imperium get past it? Well, like any good human, you throw a fucking rock at it. As the Salamanders devised a plan to chuck a stellar fragment through the Ring of Steel at one of the larger, more important space stations. According to what I read, a stellar fragment is the iron core of a star that is left behind after it dies. It's a result of the iron in the center of the star unable to fuse together more to become any more dense, and because it's a giant solid chunk of iron that was at the center of a star, it's basically hot enough to be considered a giant ball of plasma, in terms of temperature at least. Oh, it also weighs 1/10 of whatever star it was. Our sun is 4.5 nonillion pounds, which is 4.5 with 30 zeros behind it. You can go ahead and do the math and try to convert and figure out what 1/10 of that is. So the Salamanders just slingshot this shit at the Ring of Steel. The big space station that I was talking about, which I forget the name of it, tried shooting it down in desperation, but the problem is that this thing was so fucking hot, it disintegrated most ballistic munitions that tried to hit it. I have no idea how the Salamanders were dragging this thing around, but I guess the people who use Flamer and Meltas can figure out how to drag around a giant piece of burning metal. It eventually did break, but not after having to be hit with nuclear warheads. Oh, right, this is also Strike 3 and also Strike 4 because apparently we're cosplaying Metal Gear Solid now. Huron was stockpiling Exterminatus level weaponry. Remember when I said he was paranoid? The stellar fragment was merely a distraction, as after it ended up shattering, which, I mean, let's be real, it was a big fucking distraction. As it ended up shattering, the remaining Imperial forces started to send invading Astartes into the space station via drop pods and drop ships and a bunch of other shit. And accompanying them were tech priests from a nearby Forge world that helped create the Ring of Steel, and after they managed to get to the control hub, managed to convert the entirety of the Ring of Steel back to their control. Enter the final assault against the Palace of Thorns, Huron's personal palace. It should be stated that while Huron did lose all of his Space Marine allies, he still had an entire sector's worth of Imperial Guard that were loyal to him, as well as a Titan Legion. Yeah, it didn't fucking matter. Huron's final confrontation ended with him getting blasted by not a bolter, but a fucking combi melta that literally cut him in half straight down the middle, vertically, not horizontally. A small fragment of the Astral Claws managed to escape, I think around 200 if not less. They managed to escape with Huron while he was on death's door, as his apothecary Garion tried desperately to keep him alive, only for the Carcharodons to end up sabotaging multiple factories and geothermal plants on Badab Primaris, causing the planet to overflow with lava and the tectonic plates to shift, and the planet itself beginning to crack as it became a giant fucking volcano as the Badab War finished. And the only reason Huron is alive, in what would be his final moments, he made a pact with the Dark Gods, and there's one other issue. It's noted that the gene stocks of the Astral Claws are starting to become corrupt and mutate. Remember when I said Huron was a bit of a megalomaniac? Is it that much of a surprise to believe that he may or may not have sold out a majority of his chapter's future? It's supposedly stated that he never turned to chaos during the point of the Badab War itself, but technically speaking, after he got injured, the Badab war was over, and he could have converted to Chaos afterwards. I got a bunch of conflicting stuff on this, but regardless, Huron serves Chaos right now, or at least he's corrupted by it. However, it should be stated that the only reason he looks fucked up and ugly is that Garion is not a plastic surgeon. And with that, that is the story of the origins of the fucking Astral Claws. Holy shit, that was long. The Badab war will eventually be its own video, and I'll try to do it more justice, but this is a Red Corsairs video, and I wanted to hit some of the funny points, also some of the insane shit. Also, like I said, the Badab war is just a lot of fighting. It's just, here's this cool Space Marine, here's this cool Space Marine, here's this cool Chapter Master. You guys like the Mantis Warriors? To be fair, the Badab war gave us Asterion Malak and Tybros the Red Wake. Oh, by the way, fun fact about the Minotaurs, they aren't suspected to be Iron Warriors, they're straight up Iron Warriors. After the Scouring and during the Second Founding, Iron Warriors were allowed back into the Imperium. That being said, they were kept under a very tight leash. Their gene seed is quote-unquote chimeric, which means that it's a cross between two different Primarchs, or possibly, as we know now, a traitor Primarch. And it also explains why they're kept on a very tight leash by the High Lords of Terra, and they're also just fucking assholes. So yeah, no, Minotaurs are actually just Iron Warriors. It's not like a suspicion thing. It's just flat out there. Fast forward into the future, and we now have the Red Corsairs. So who wants to guess what their war cry is? After Huron dropped the Shakespearean bomb that is, the only reward for loyalty is betrayal, guess what their war cry is? It's them shouting slurs. That's not a joke. Their war cry is verbatim, according to the wiki, transmitting a tirade of expletives and threats across all Voxcaster frequencies as they ambush enemy ships and settlements. Because they're fucking pirates. Fun fact, the Red Corsairs just control the Maelstrom now. Again, after Luft Huron had a majority of his body replaced with cybernetics, he is now more machine than man. Dubbed Huron Blackheart, Master of the Maelstrom, he is second to Abaddon the Despoiler in terms of being a commander for the armies of Chaos. So why don't we go ahead and talk about the gear that he has, given that he's a pirate, so he probably has some pretty cool shit. You've probably seen this image, no doubt, about him. He has a modified bionically connected lightning claw with a flamer combo inside the palm, dubbed the Tyrant's Claw, and you see that in his hand? He's just incinerating a fucking guardsman. He rarely wears a helmet, as the amount of insane bionics embedded into him make it so uncomfortable that practically all of his war gear has to be adjusted just for him to use, due to being what could only be described as a heavily tricked out cybernetic potato. Once again, just look at his fucking face. He also has Hamadria, which is a weird warp entity that just follows him around and acts as his familiar. It is said that while Huron was on his half-dead, out-of-body experience vision quest, where he ended up making a pact with the Dark Gods, Hamadria appeared right next to him. Basically just his presence rather than physically being there, but Huron knew he was there, or it was there. I don't know if Hamadria has a gender, I don't think it really matters, it's a fucking warp entity. As Huron regained his strength, so did Hamadria, until it gained its own physical form. It's able to bestow Huron with warp abilities such as manipulating time, protecting him from psychic attacks, as well as possibly allowing him to read the minds of people around him. It's helped him survive multiple assassination attempts, and given that Hamadria is a warp entity, it can't actually die unless you go into the warp and kill its soul or something. The Chaos Gods gave Huron a fucking warp dog, and it's literally been loyal to him almost more than any other Space Marine that ever came to his side. Except for Garion. Garion literally saved his life. Let's talk about Garion briefly, since he's the only of the Red Corsairs who actually matters in terms of being a character. By the way, the Red Corsairs actually have a lot of characters, it turns out, but they're mostly spread across a bunch of different books, and you can't really play a majority of them. That being said, there's the whole Master of the Maelstrom's retinue thing going on, which looks pretty neat. Also, Varial is one of them from the Night Lord's Omnibus. He shows up and he joins First Claw in the second book, I think. But Garion is the Corpse Master, a famed apothecary, and he taught Varial, for anyone who's curious. Garion is called the Corpse Master because he has an obsession with death, particularly with watching people die. He also rips out the gene seed of friends or foe alike, and as seen on his mini, he doesn't care if you're still half alive, he's going to dissect you on the fucking spot. Apparently, I mean, obviously, Garion is ride or die with Huron, given that he did save his life, or at least tried to. Also, he kind of looks like Mr. Boss from Smiling Friends. We got the fucking Norwood scale in 40k before we got Eldar Exodites. Get fucked. Beyond them, the Red Corsairs are actually interesting. Firstly, they're pirates. They stay close to the Maelstrom and attack anybody who gets too close to them. But because the Maelstrom is now a part of the Great Rift, their territory has greatly expanded in their weird, fucked up warp highway. So firstly, the Red Corsairs, they hate religion, like all religions. Despite Huron making a pact with the Chaos Gods, and Chaos worship itself is not really allowed, or at least it's heavily looked down upon, similar to the Night Lords, which makes them truly renegade. We'll talk about the minis soon. Their combat style can only be described as them being assholes. They're not Night Lords where they attack blind children. They'll take on semi-proper fights where they will use their resources, but they literally plunder for the sake of loving it. They enjoy the fact that they are ransacking the worlds that they once swore to protect, and it shows up in their playstyle if you play them on the tabletop. Currently, the Red Corsairs are fast, and they're also my favorite Chaos detachment at the moment. They have Assault on all their guns, which means that they can still advance and shoot. They kill things better if the enemy is on an objective, and because, you know, they're pirates, and all their stratagems are based around movement and a bunch of other shit. My favorite is Opportunistic Raiders, where if you're not in combat at the end of the fight phase, you just get to get a free move. I mean, you have to spend command points to do it, but it's kind of funny because it works in any combat phase, if I remember correctly. So you're able to just, in one turn, get 3 full movements for purely existing and having command points. Their enhancements in this edition are kind of funny. Mark of the Hound, you get a free scout on any unit. Despot's Claim is if you're near the enemy deployment zone, you just loot it for command points. But my favorite is probably the Tyrant's Lash, where you get to fall back and shoot. And I like it because it speaks very greatly to the mentality of the Red Corsairs. Honor is fucking cringe. Why stay locked in melee combat when you can just take a few steps back and blast some Ultramarines with combi weapons? There's not much for the Red Corsairs in the 41st millennia. One fact is that they managed to steal Gilliman's ship before abandoning it and fucking it up because the Red Corsairs literally didn't have the capabilities of manning the entire thing. And because they're pirates, they have many forms of creative punishments, one being that they inter traitors into a dreadnought sarcophagus and just jettison them out into space. The Red Corsairs are honestly the perfect renegade force. They aren't fully chaos, they act as true pirates of the Maelstrom, and specifically places like the Hell's Iris are spaceports that act not just as outposts for the Red Corsairs, but I also believe they partake in trade with anybody that isn't the Imperium, or maybe even rogue traders and shit, I don't know. I think freebooters and Drukhari show up to trade and do whatever limited leisure they can provide. But I like the Red Corsairs the most because I think this is one of the few factions that GW understands. Look at the new releases for them. The Raiders, the Reaver Captain or whatever his name is, even the Mashes of the Maelstrom with the models like Sargoda and that one Xenos Enforcer. They're a faction that takes the best and stays at a pole's length away from chaos. They don't want to be tempted to fall. Their fight is with the Imperium and whichever dumbasses end up falling into their borders. The Red Corsairs are what happens when the Imperium fails. The Badab War was a minor heresy, and it ended with one of the most powerful allies becoming decimated and then turning to the other side, where the idiocy of those in charge and their hypocrisy pushed someone to the edge. Someone in the comments no doubt is going to make some dumb political allegory like was happening in the last video about the Red Corsairs and the Imperium to real life, and while I'm not going to say that some of them are wrong or most of them aren't wrong, or depends on who we're talking about, I will say this. Huron fucking did something about it. And while he did get fucked up for it, I've never seen a man stand 10 toes on business against a force that outnumbered him hundreds of billions to 1 and still be left standing. And you know what's even funnier? Huron is way more happier being a Chaos Lord than he ever was being a chapter master for the Imperium. To quote, "I was the loyal soldier. I fought your wars across 100 worlds. My brothers bled and died to protect your fragile borders of your empire. But your Imperium, in its ignorance, betrayed me. You called me traitor, renegade, heretic. Well, so be it. I have carved out my own empire where the strong can prosper, unshackled from the petty fears of weak and tired old men. I am Huron Blackheart, the tyrant of Badab, Lord of the Maelstrom." Thanks for listening. And thank you to these fine channel members. As always, join the Discord, even if you're gifted, it's fine. Just follow the rules so that way we can all have a chill time. Probably going to be playing some TTS after I upload this video, but we'll go ahead and see what's going on about that. Thanks to Adam M., Alexander McCabe, Arctic Berserker, Balding Dragon 62, Captain Bubbles, CBD Drawer 95, Corspor, NV, Javier Soto, Josh from Allstate, Matt the Jam Man, Mount Papa 11, Omidium, Overdraft Perfection, Regular Alley, Ritz, The Coffee Addict, The God Emperor of R, The Hog, Toaster, and Zachary Y. And as always, a bigger thank you to these absolute psychopaths, that being Istra, Ape Brain Esquire, Cobalt Cryptid, Commander Apo CC1119, Crazy Axeman, Dism, Felix, Gap G, Human Spirit Indomitus. I see go 11, John Papa John Stumo, Nameless Louise, Neverlost Man, Robbie Nito, Solace in the Void, and Up, Up, Down, Down, Left, Right. Next week is Xenos. I don't know what the fuck I should cover, so I think I'm just going to leave that up to a vote. See you soon!